All right, welcome to another episode of the Cassels Cast. Joining me today is going to be Elie Deglaoui and Bruce Veliz. Together, we're going to go over a few of the most interesting teams ahead of the NBA trade deadline before wrapping up with answering some of your guys' questions. Without any further ado, let's get into the episode. All right, joining the show now is Bruce Velez and Elie Deglaoui. How you boys doing today?
Appreciate you having me on again.
Yeah, doing great as well, and thanks for having us back on. Excited to talk some hoops.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had to run it back with the three-man weave. Today we're going to be talking about just some of the most interesting teams ahead of the trade deadline. Trade deadline's 3 weeks away from now, which is kind of crazy, and things are starting to move fast. Obviously, we had the first big trade of the NBA trade season with Trae Young last week, and it looks like we have many moves to come. So, yeah, first things first, I think we got to talk about the Warriors because they're involved in a lot of trade rumors, and most of it sort of centers around Jonathan Kuminga. So, yeah, what do you guys think of what the Warriors can potentially get for him? And do you think they have a big trade on the horizon, or are they more or less going to have to settle for a bad package in return for Kuminga?
So, I honestly am very confused with this whole situation. I know you guys have kind of talked about it as well, but it's just a kind of overall bad situation for Jonathan Kuminga. I think that they will eventually move on from him. He's obviously demanded this trade. He is now trade eligible as of today of recording, and who knows, maybe while we're recording this pod, something does happen. We've kind of joked around about that, but I do think that we could see something coming in the next few days because he did receive these DNPs. There are teams that are interested. I don't think the Warriors will get the package that they ultimately do want because of, the years of this staggering relationship back and forth between the two, multiple seasons with DMPs and coaching decisions. It's clearly not working. The Warriors really don't have that much leverage, but I do think they will get something in return. I think they'll contact teams like the Kings, the Nets, those types of teams around the edges. There's been even mention of the Dallas Mavericks, maybe even the Chicago Bulls for some expiring salary, just to get a deal done so that all of these parties can move on happily and we can actually see Jonathan Kuminga in a situation where he can actually try to be that, second or third star that he thinks he can be for the Golden State Warriors, one that Steve Kerr's been very limiting him to be able to get to.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like Bruce said, I mean, a trade pretty much seems inevitable, and it could happen at any point at this point ahead of the trade deadline. But, I mean, I just don't think they're actually going to be able to get anything really big in return. I think their return could still be solid because I would just assume that other teams around the league still see some potential in Kuminga, but his value has never been this low. Everybody knows that he and the Warriors already weren't really much of a fit. And on top of that, with the whole contract situation from last season, he's had a lot of DNPs this year, obviously. And now that he's requested a trade, I mean, the Warriors don't really have any leverage. Wherever he ends up, he ends up. But a trade is inevitable. I think other teams around the league are pretty keen on the fact that he doesn't want to be in Golden State. Golden State doesn't want him anymore. I can't imagine Golden State getting. They might be able to get something in return, maybe some draft capital or some win now player, but I think they're probably going to be a little bit disappointed by what they get in return.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, they kind of did this to themselves in many ways. I mean, they turned down an offer in the summer for Malik Monk and draft capital. I think that would have been a pretty good return, quite frankly, especially considering that Kuminga hasn't been in the rotation for the last month, and there's no signs that he's going to return. I mean, the relationship between him and Kerr is clearly broken, and the organization just doesn't want to move on, and that's really unfortunate. I think they're holding the Warriors back a lot. It's just time to cut ties, even if the value isn't there. I do think there's a world where they potentially net like a Michael Porter Jr. Now that would involve potentially giving up a guy like Brandon Podziemski, Moses Moody, and then some draft capital. So I don't think it's like super likely, especially because the Warriors have been super hesitant to hold on to this draft capital. But I do think there's a world where that type of trade is possible. But ultimately, I think the most realistic scenario is that he gets dealt to a team like Sacramento or Chicago for like next to nothing, and that's just not ideal for the Warriors. But yeah, what do you guys think about this idea of a Michael Porter Jr. Warriors trade, and the fit there? Because I know that's something that's been sort of tossed around a lot recently.
Yeah, personally, I think it works kind of good for both teams. I know you mentioned throwing in another player like either Podziemski or Moses Moody. I actually think that throwing in Moses Moody would also be very good for the Brooklyn Nets, kind of getting in kind of that defensive guard, another little playmaker to go into their rotation. And for the Warriors, I feel like they will greatly miss that because he has been a big part of their lineup, but they do have that contract of Buddy Hield. They still have a contract of Trace Jackson Davis that they could use with some other draft capital to go and replace that kind of guard to where I think it wouldn't be as terrible for the Golden State Warriors. And I think them bringing in Michael Porter Jr. would be a great fit for them. He obviously is a solid three-point shooter, can work out in the perimeter alongside Curry, can help bolster their offense. He's also a pretty solid rebounder as well, something that they've kind of lacked in their regard as well. And I don't think it would maybe cost them as much. I know that he's right around he's a pretty solid salary, but I know they have a lot of older draft picks as well, but I don't think he'd cost like 3 or 4 draft picks. Maybe he'd only cost like 1 or maybe 2 potentially. So I think that still gives the Warriors some leeway to make some more moves down the line as well. I think that this trade could work very well. I think Kuminga for the Nets is also, again, another little bit of a fun team for him to kind of just go out there, show his athleticism, try to be that kind of star that he wants to be. But who knows if the Nets even want him? Maybe they'd have to be a 3rd or 4th team involved as well to get that done.
Yeah, I mostly agree. The one part that I'm going to kind of disagree with Bruce on is that I feel like it would actually take a lot more for the Warriors to acquire Michael Porter than I think a lot of people may realize, because Michael Porter Jr. is in the midst of probably his best season at the NBA level. He's become a much more well-rounded player. He's becoming a little bit of a playmaker, which nobody really expected. And I mean, I don't remember where I saw this and what the reports were exactly, but I do remember seeing reports pretty recently about how Brooklyn does view Michael Porter as a future piece. They don't just view him as a guy that they're going to have for now and sell him off for assets. It does seem like he's actually part of their plans, and I think they might be a little bit picky to actually move on from him. I think in theory, Golden State would benefit from having an extra scorer, an extra shooter, and just a little bit more youth, somewhat, in a guy like Michael Porter Jr. I don't know if I actually see a trade happening just because of, I guess, what I've seen about the Nets' interest in just keeping him for the long run.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's definitely valid. And if you listen to the podcast a lot, you would know that Elie is the #1 Michael Porter Jr. fan in the world. So that definitely tracks. Also, at the same time, I would say like some of the Warriors picks, especially in the post-Steph era, could be super valuable. Even if the Nets aren't getting a ton, just having that future pick in like 2030, 2031, whatever the case may be, could be something that catches the Nets' eye because the Warriors might not be very good then. And they already have that sort of late pick from the Nuggets there. So that could be something. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I do think it would be a pretty hefty price. And the Warriors organization, I have no faith in them making this move. Obviously, they made that big swing for Jimmy Butler last deadline, but they didn't have to give up much. And we've seen the Warriors be super hesitant to get players who are perfect fits in their system, like Michael Porter Jr. or like Lauri Markkanen was the perfect example. He was just such an obvious fit, and they were just like, no, we don't want to give up Podziemski for him. We don't want to give up Kuminga. We don't want to give up any picks. It's like, then you're not going to get them. So I feel like this organization is really hurting them. I don't think Mike Dunleavy Jr. is doing the best job. And then the owner, Joe Lacob, has this like irrational attachment to Kuminga. And I mean, there was a report that came out today that's like the Warriors wouldn't mind keeping him past the deadline. And that's just absolute lunacy to me. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the Warriors just don't make a big move like this. But on paper, I feel like it's a really cool idea. And then kind of sticking with that idea of a potential Nets trade, another guy I've thought about is Nick Claxton, who might not be as expensive as MPJ, but the Warriors desperately need a big man. So do you guys think there's any possibility for a move with Claxton?
I feel like this is kind of the prime time for Claxton to get moved. I know his name's been brought up these last couple of seasons. I know a little bit in the offseason when people were kind of predicting what the Nets were going to do. He was a target. Even last year, he was someone that was brought up as a potential trade target, even though he wasn't having, his best season. But I do think that Claxton is someone that the Warriors would value and go out and get. I think his fit alongside Draymond Green would also be very solid. I do think he would cost less than Michael Porter Jr., so maybe that's, once again, maybe a reason why the Warriors go this route. Maybe if the Nets are commanding Moody, Kuminga, and one of those future picks without Curry in like 2031 or 2032, maybe that's something they're reluctant to do for Michael Porter Jr., but maybe something they're a little bit more comfortable to do for Nicholas Claxton if it's only Kuminga and one of the picks without including Moses Moody, and it's maybe not one of those far out picks. So I could see Nicholas Claxton being a little bit of a better fit. And plus, like you said, they need that size, they need the rebounding, they need a little bit of that defense. They really don't have that there with Horford not really playing much of the regular season as they're saving him for the postseason. Quentin Post hasn't been really that top tier guy. I think they could use it.
Yeah, I could definitely see Nick Claxton going to Golden State. Nick Claxton, I mean, I'm pretty high on Nick Claxton. Obviously, we know what he can do defensively, but he's also just become a much more well-rounded offensive player, too. He's good on the boards. He's still young. He's only 26. So I could definitely see Brooklyn trading him. My only concern, I guess, with the idea of Golden State landing him, I feel like Nick Claxton's going to have a bit of a market. I could definitely see a team like Indiana going after him. I could see a team like Boston going after him. Atlanta seems to be in the center market with Porzingis being him. Who knows what's going to happen with him moving on? And it seems like they're not too high on Onyeka Okongwu. But outside of that, I think Golden State would be a really good place for Nick Claxton. And kind of like Bruce said, I mean, he would be a great fit next to Draymond. So I could definitely see that happening. Whether they'd be able to win a bidding war, we'll see. But I think that would be a really interesting fit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it would be a perfect fit. One thing with Claxton that I feel like goes a little bit underrated is like you said, Elie, his offensive growth has been pretty significant. He can put the ball on the floor a lot more. He's actually a really solid passer too, so I feel like he'd be a really ideal fit in that free-flowing system. And honestly, if Golden State wants to, I feel like they potentially could win a bid in war. I just don't think they want to. I don't think they want to make a big move. I think this organization is just a little too conservative. I feel like I've said that like 3 or 4 times, but that's a big concern. And as a Curry fan, it's something that kind of pisses me off, quite frankly, with this team. But yeah, any closing thoughts on the Warriors before we move ahead to our next team?
I'd just like to say one thing. I know I mentioned in a previous podcast with you guys that I had like the Trey Murphy for Jonathan Kuminga trade. I don't think that's going to happen, obviously, with Trey Murphy kind of excelling. But man, if they could have gotten Trey Murphy maybe a couple weeks ago, if this Jonathan Kuminga situation wasn't capped at January 15th, if it was at December 15th, I think that would have been one of like the ideal guys for the Warriors, not only to help them now and for the future, but I feel like he's one of those guys that could have taken them maybe out of that like 8 seed situation that they're in right now and brought them into that kind of top seed 6 situation with all the injuries. But it's kind of tough for the Warriors. Hopefully they can kind of, as much as I don't really like the Warriors, I want them to do good for Curry at this end of his career, so I want them to make at least some sort of move.
Yeah, most definitely. I feel like the Trey Murphy one is such a great shout, and that would be an awesome fit. He's, I mean, a little bit similar to Michael Porter Jr., but more upside, a little bit more dependable. So yeah, that would have been a perfect fit. Quick aside on the Pelicans. Why is like everyone on the Pelicans untouchable? I mean, I get like you don't want to trade Trey Murphy. I feel like that kind of makes sense. Obviously, you don't want to trade the rookies. But why are they saying that Zion's untouchable? I mean, what are they doing? I mean, God, I'm sorry. What a stupid organization.
Funny, but yeah, the fact that they even had like Derek Queen and Jeremiah Fears in that conversation was kind of funny as well. Like in that tweet, like I don't think that they're trying to trade their rookies that they just drafted, but I agree with you. Zion should be on the market. I know he's been playing good as of recently, but and the fact as well that his contract can be non-guaranteed depending on his games played. I mean, maybe that's kind of the pocket they want to still hold on to with that regard, because to just get out the money, but I feel like at this point with him playing so well, you have to kind of move off of him.
I agree, because at the very least they should be open to trading. Whether they should or not is, I guess, a different story, but they should at least be open to it, because the part that's so interesting to me is the Zion experience in New Orleans hasn't gone well, and it's not going to go well. So I feel like in theory, if the Pelicans are saying we're not trading Zion, that means one of two things. Either they're confident that he can be the franchise star that he's going to be, or that they want him to be, which outside of 2 seasons hasn't happened, or they think he'll be able to build his trade value back up. And he's probably not going to. It just kind of feels like if there's ever a time to trade him, it's now, when you obviously need draft picks. I mean, you're not going to get one for this year, but you need as many assets as you can. And Zion potentially is just going to be declining from here on out as an asset. I just feel like, yeah, the fact that he's untouchable is pretty insane to me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, with him playing good in recent weeks, I feel like that's the perfect time to trade him. I feel like for other teams around the league, it's so easy to look at him and be like, damn, like if we could just get him in a better situation, the upside's totally there. And when he puts together this like impressive stretch for a couple weeks, I feel like that's when his market would be at the highest. So it's just totally baffling. And I mean, they should have traded him before, but I also feel like this whole Trae Young thing should be a cautionary tale for teams around the league just to not hold on to these sort of decline in stars potentially. I feel like, yeah, I mean, Zion rumors have been around forever, and the Pelicans have never really seriously pursued trading him, it seems like. So I feel like the time is now. And I mean, another team to sort of different extent that we're seeing that with is the Grizzlies with Ja Morant. Came out last Friday that the Grizzlies, for the first time, are open to trading Ja Morant. Came out a couple days after Young got traded, so I don't think that's necessarily a coincidence. But yeah, I mean, to me, a divorce sort of seems inevitable at this point. But yeah, what do you guys make of the Grizzlies potentially moving on from Ja? And it looks like, for the record, Ja is open to moving on from the Grizzlies as well. What do you make of what they could potentially get and who some potential suitors could be?
So I genuinely think they're going to get the same level of a Trae Young package, and that's kind of what's been rumored, even though the Grizzlies want more. I just think it's funny that, like, how this reporting came out. Like, Shams said, the Grizzlies are willing to trade Ja Morant for the first time ever, but if they can't find a trade for him, they're willing to keep him. Like, what is that reporting? It's just funny. I know that they have to do that, but it's just funny just to see, like, clearly they're trying to move on from Ja. He's sitting out as we speak. We talked about it before the podcast, but there's going to be a game going on in 10 minutes in Berlin with the Grizzlies and the Magic. He is sitting out in Berlin. Adam Silver is furious that he's sitting out. Like, this is a thing that they don't want to be happening. Josh said he doesn't want to play for the Grizzlies anymore. He got in a fight with Vince Williams. It's time to go, and all these off-the-court things and just antics from Ja Morant isn't going to make the situation easier, especially when you got NBA Central quote tweeting that Ja Morant bought a house in Miami for $3 million from Drew Starr and all these other random things. Like, it's just not going in the right direction. I do think he'll eventually get traded. I don't think he'll go for that much. I think the suitors that could be interested, obviously Miami, like we just mentioned, I feel like they're kind of at the front. If it was still like back in a couple years ago where players get to pick where they want to go, that's going to be the deal that's going to happen. Probably revolving around that Terry Rozier contract if the NBA allows that to be traded, maybe with a first-round pick and some other filler like a Simone Fontecchio or maybe a Nikola Jovic in a deal like that. That's something that could get done. Personally, though, I have a trade with Ja Morant that I really like, and it's something that I came up with, so I want to know your guys' thoughts. I shared it on Twitter, so you may have seen it already, but it's a 4-team trade involving Ja Morant, and there's going to have to be picks involved. I don't really know I don't really know what picks are going to be involved, but basically, the Grizzlies trade Ja Morant to the Kings. The Kings trade Zach LaVine with some picks to the Nets. The Nets trade Michael Porter Jr. to the Pistons. And then the Pistons trade Jaden Ivey, Tobias Harris, and maybe a pick to the Grizzlies in that deal. So the Grizzlies move off of Ja. They get a job replacement with Jaden Ivey, someone they can extend, and get some salary filler with Tobias Harris. Could be a veteran contract to keep them in the long term. The Nets take another flyer on another player, moving off Michael Porter Jr., but taking on Zach LaVine on his 1-year contract. Maybe they could get more capital for him and would get draft capital from the Kings in doing so. The Kings take a flyer on Ja. Most likely would have to get rid of Schroeder, Westbrook, some other of their guards, but they have Ja, Sabonis, some sort of thing they can run. And then the Pistons get, obviously, Michael Porter Jr., their added upgrade for Tobias Harris, and they only have to really give up Jaden Ivey to do so. But that's kind of my thoughts. I'll let you guys take the reins now.
I feel like, so I do think Sacramento is a legit place for Ja to land. I actually like that a lot. That's one of the teams that I realistically could see working out. Well, I guess in theory. I mean, if he's not happy in Memphis, I don't know how much happier he's going to be in Sacramento. But in theory, from a basketball standpoint, I think it makes sense. The one part that I keep going back to is I don't know. I just don't know if Detroit would do that. That's the one team I keep going back to. I feel like they do technically upgrade, but I feel like Tobias Harris is a guy, like, I don't know. I like Tobias Harris in Detroit, not even from a basketball standpoint, but just like, I guess from a veteran standpoint. That's a very young team, and they need as many veterans as they can get. And no disrespect to him, I don't know him as a person. Like Eamon said, he's my guy, but I don't know if you really want Michael Porter Jr. to be your veteran in Detroit. So that's the only reason I'm a little skeptical from Detroit's perspective. But from a basketball standpoint, I think it works. And also, I still really like Jaden Ivey. But overall, I think it's a good deal.
I'm rocking with that a lot. Yeah, no. I actually really do like it from the Pistons perspective. I was thinking about bringing the Pistons up when we were talking about MPJ earlier because I feel like Pistons and Warriors are my favorite landing spots for him, or Oklahoma City, which is just kind of terrifying. I do agree Tobias Harris is like super valuable as a veteran presence, but at the same time, when you have a chance to get an all-star level player and the Eastern Conference is as wide open as it is, and you need some three-point shooting, I feel like MPJ just makes a lot of sense. And I do think they have to trade Jaden Ivey just because he hasn't really found his groove in this rotation. I think he just kind of needs a change of scenery there. So I do like that for them, and you're not totally breaking the bank. So I do really like it for the Pistons. Sacramento, I feel like it's like when you're thinking about teams that could trade for Ja, there's not exactly a long list, and Sacramento is definitely on that list. You get to move off the Levine contract, so I think that sort of makes sense. And I mean, the Nets can definitely afford to take on some extra money, and I feel like they've done a great job of just, hey, taking on some guys and building their value up, and maybe they can do sort of the same thing with Levine and as well as getting some draft capital. So I like it. And then for the Grizzlies, this is honestly like a pretty solid outcome because when you look at Tobias Harris, he has a $26 million expiring contract. And then you look at Jaden Ivey, and he's like a nice sort of buy low guy for you. And they could really rejuvenate his career and then ultimately agree to some sort of extension in the offseason. Like you guys, I'm also really high on Ivy as a player, so I think it would be a nice fit there. So yeah, all around, I mean, it's kind of bonkers that a 4-team trade can work out like this, but I'm definitely rocking with that. I'd love to see something like this happen at the deadline because it would just be so much fun. We haven't seen a crazy 4-team trade in a while.
Yeah, I just want to see some waves just get brought up at the deadline, honestly. And I feel like, especially this year, we have a lot of teams, and with the aprons as well, like, teams obviously go and make these signings or trades for these players to try to shake up their roster, try to compete. But then when we get to a certain point, it's clearly not working, and some teams either have to disband and go down the gutter, like the Kings look like they're going to be doing and breaking it all up. Or there's teams like the Warriors who need to win and have to make moves on the fly, so they're desperately going to look to make additions out there. So I do think we're going to see a lot of these kind of middle-of-the-pack teams or teams that maybe are at the bottom that have intriguing pieces actually sell so that we can get some shaking up in the conferences. Because in both conferences, there are very close in certain aspects. Like I know in the West, like there's obviously the top two, but after that, it's pretty close from like 4 to 7, and same thing in the East as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of that at the deadline, and I'm excited for some chaos. Real quick, in terms of other teams for Ja, you mentioned the Heat. I feel like that's a really solid fit, and Ja's camp seems to be pushing for that, and I can definitely understand why. It would be kind of interesting to see him back in that system that he hated last year, but I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for him, honestly, and I think Heat culture could really, really benefit him, and Eric Spoelstra could benefit him a lot. So I think that would make a lot of sense. And the Heat just need a little bit more offensive juice. And if the price is right, I think it makes a lot of sense. But the other team I'd be looking at is the Toronto Raptors because they just have a couple of not ideal contracts, especially that Emmanuel Quickley contract that they're looking to move off of. So I think they're sort of destined to make a move. And in a wide open Eastern Conference, why not sort of swing for the fences, even if it's a bit risky to trade for Ja, especially when you have some of these contracts that aren't great. And then for the Grizzlies, obviously, you don't want to be taking on that Emmanuel Quickley deal, but you could potentially get some draft capital and or some intriguing young players, maybe like a Grady Dick or Jacoby Walter back in that deal. So I think it could potentially make sense for both teams.
Yeah, I was gonna say Toronto. Toronto is my I was gonna say sneaky pick, but I guess it's not that sneaky. If two of us said Toronto, but I do like Toronto a lot for Ja. I mean, we actually talked about it a little bit before the pod, but it's gotten to the point where it doesn't really seem like Ja's much of a positive asset anymore, and he's only going to keep declining as an asset from here on out. He can't shoot. He's super athletic, but being athletic can only get you so far, and everybody knows about his off-court situations, and I mean, it just kind of seems like if there's ever a time for Memphis to trade him, it's now, and I could definitely see Sacramento working out. I've opened up or warmed up to the idea of it being Miami. I was a little bit weird about it because I just didn't really think he was a good fit in that system, which I know a lot of people kind of disagree with, but he's not somebody who can space the floor. He's not a perimeter threat. But I've warmed up to it. Obviously, Toronto is another team that I think could make sense. Toronto is, I think, currently the number 4 seed in the East as it stands, and they realistically could be a top 2 seed when the season's done. You got to swing for the fences, I think, if you're Toronto, and I think Ja Morant could be that guy. So I definitely think Ja's gone. One of the teams that I had said before was Washington, which is why I mean, obviously it's not going to happen anymore, but I mean, I guess it still could. It just wouldn't make a lot of sense. But I'm excited to see where Ja goes. I mean, if I had to pinpoint one team, I would probably give it to Miami, but I think there are actually a few teams that might be interested in him at this point.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see where he does overall end up because I do think he will be traded at this point. I feel like it's kind of writing on the wall, similar with Trae Young over these last couple of weeks. It's going to happen. But I do like the Toronto fit as well. The one problem is that I do see with Toronto is I think they need kind of more of a 3-point scoring guard, especially if they're going to be losing out on Emmanuel quickly. And Ja Morant, I believe, is shooting 20% from 3-point land this season. So, I mean, it's not really the greatest, especially if they're going to be trading Grady Dick as well. And I feel like that they're going to find some other 3-level creation for that team. But I do think, like, similar to that Brandon Ingram trade last year, that's kind of the move that the Raptors team wants to make. They were interested in Anthony Davis, and they still are now, even with his injury update as a potential addition. They've been interested in DeMontis Sabonis. They were interested in Kevin Durant in the offseason. They're always looking to just make additions on the edges just to take that next level. So it ultimately wouldn't shock me, even with his 20% from three-point shooting, that they still would make that deal just to get off of that Emmanuel quickly contract and set themselves up. But I think that the Raptors will definitely do something with some of this other.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the Raptors are destined to make a move, whether it's for Ja or Sabonis, who we're probably going to talk about later, maybe even Anthony Davis. With Davis, I feel like at this point he might not get moved because of the 1 million injury concerns. But real quick, before moving on to our next team, I just want to mention Jaren Jackson Jr. quickly because I feel like there has been some light trade buzz around him. So do you guys think it might make sense for the Grizzlies to just completely tear this thing down and go into like a full tank rebuild, or would you look to sort of just retool around Jaren Jackson?
I would look to retool around Jaren Jackson. I still think he is young enough to kind of go with this team. And they really don't really have anyone filling in that hole or like replaceable for him. They have Zach Edey still in the front court, obviously, who's going to be very good. They obviously have Scottie Pippen, who's been pretty good for them. They have Cedric Howard. They have some of these younger guys that they are developing, Vince Williams, even G.G. Jackson. I still think that Jaren Jackson can still be a vital part of that as an offensive hub for them in the low post, and it's still as a solid defender for them. And I think wouldn't take too much away. I also forgot Cam Spencer. They do have a lot of young guys, but if they did want to kind of blow it up and get for that massive rebuild overhaul, then I could see them doing it if they got like a package of like 3 or 4 first round picks, something similar to Desmond Bain. But if you're not getting a package like that because now his contract's going to be 50 million instead of 35 million going into next year, then I think they should keep him.
I think I agree. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like I don't know. I feel like I'm not as high on Jaren Jackson Jr. as a lot of other people are. Like I like him a lot. Also, fun fact: he was the first ever NBA player drafted to be younger than me. So I'm always gonna have some sort of appreciation for Jaren Jackson Jr. for that fact. But I don't know. I just feel like I mean he's not much of a rebounder. I feel like he really only excels if he has a legit center next to him, which it seems like Zach Edey is. Shouldn't say he only excels like that. That's not true, but that's definitely, I think, when he's at his best and at his most valuable. And I just feel like for Memphis specifically, I feel like for Memphis and for Jaren Jackson Jr., it's best for him to just kind of stick around for the long run. I don't know how successful Jaren Jackson Jr. would be in another system. I'm sure he would be good. I'm sure he would be obviously a great defensive anchor. But I do think his best opportunity is in Memphis. And I feel like at this point, they are just better off keeping him around and rebuilding around him and seeing what they can do.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I mean, like you said, he does have certain limitations. The rebounding, it's just, he's like kind of one of the weirdest players ever. It's like, hey, this guy won Defensive Player of the Year. He is truly one of the best defenders in the league, but he's also damn near 7 foot tall and he can't rebound to save his life. So he really does need to play next to someone like a Zach Edey. And yeah, I mean, for the Grizzlies, I feel like going from having like that quote unquote big three with Ja, JJJ, and Bane a year ago to getting rid of all of them, and yeah, maybe you get, especially for Jaren Jackson, I think you would get some nice picks, but it would kind of be a big change. And I feel like for a smaller market, just to have like he's not a superstar, but an all-star level player is a huge thing. So I just wouldn't try to tear it down like that, especially with Memphis being a smaller market, unless, like Bruce said, you just get an absolute haul that you can't turn down, something similar to the Bane deal. So yeah, I don't think I would look into it, quite frankly. And honestly, I don't know if there's any team around the league that would be like, yep, let's just kind of mortgage our future to get JJJ. He's the missing piece. Maybe Atlanta, but I still don't totally see it. So yeah, I would just try to keep him. I do kind of like the Grizzlies, like future. They have a ton of picks still. Cedric Howard's awesome. So I think they're in a good spot overall, even if this Ja Morant trade doesn't yield you the best package. But yeah, unless we have any closing thoughts on the Grizz, I think we can move ahead to Sacramento.
Yeah, I'm ready to go down to Sacramento and talk about
Same,
the
same.
worst team in the Western Conference now, right?
I think they might have surpassed the Pelicans because they're on a little win streak,
Oh,
actually. But
yeah,
I mean, the
They
worst
really are.
organization in probably pro sports. So yeah, I mean, Sacramento, we've kind of hinted at them a couple times throughout the podcast. They are on a 3-game win streak quietly, but I don't buy into that at all. It seems like they're gonna at least trade one of this quote unquote big three of Domantas Sabonis, Zach LaVine, and DeMar DeRozan. But yeah, ultimately, of those three, like, do you guys see any of them being more likely to be moved or less likely to be moved, and potential landing spots for any of them? I feel like it's a little bit more open with Sacramento. They don't have like a clear cut, this guy's 100% getting traded like a Ja Morant, but they could go down a lot of different avenues, and I do think it's best for them to lean in towards that rebuild.
I think there's a positive for each player to be traded, but there's also a negative for each player to also be traded as well, which makes it so hard for this Kings team and just trying to find places, because it's like, you would think Sabonis would have the most value, right? Because he's probably the best player. But his contract is so bad, and he's not the greatest defender, that if you are a team trading for him, you need that, like we were talking about, like with just Jaren Jackson 20 seconds ago, you need that kind of interior rim protector alongside of him to be really well for him to succeed. And I don't necessarily know if there's a team out there that really has that, that's going to make that deal. With DeMar DeRozan, I think he's probably the most likely to be traded just because his contract is partially guaranteed next year. But I would argue he's probably the worst out of the three and probably needs the ball in his hands the most to succeed, which is not the greatest for DeMar DeRozan at this age of his career. And then you also have Zach LaVine, who's on a terrible contract, one that somehow was traded last year, which I don't know how that was possible, but one that is also not really great on the defensive side. I mean, probably the best scorer out of the bunch. The Bucks were interested in him, but like, is there any other team that's going to be interested in him? Maybe like a Portland Trailblazers could be interested in him, but like, I don't know. I don't know if that's taking them to the next level. So like, it's really, really hard to I think if you were to ask me, DeMar DeRozan will be traded, and I will say that Sabonis will be traded. But at the same time, I could also tell you that I think that only Zach LaVine could get traded, and it's just going to be to the Bucks because the Bucks are trying to salvage Giannis, and that's the only deal that they could do. So it's really, really hard. But man, the Kings just need to do everything in their power to try to trade everyone at least.
Yeah, it's really hard to kind of decipher what they're going to do and I guess just what their plans are and what they can do. I kind of lean towards Zach LaVine being the most likely trade candidate just because I think he has the most trade value. Like, I don't think anybody's going to trade for Sabonis. I don't really see a world where anybody trades for DeRozan, but I could definitely see a team trading for Zach LaVine. He is still a fantastic scorer. He's still pretty young, all things considered, at least in comparison to guys like DeMar DeRozan. I don't know. I don't know how they can trade him. Kind of like Bruce was saying, maybe it is just Milwaukee who seems to have interest in everybody. Maybe that's the move. Maybe, I don't know. I feel like Milwaukee's kind of in a bidding war the other way. Like most teams usually do a bidding war to try and get a player that everybody's pursuing. Milwaukee's kind of doing the opposite. It's like an inverse bidding war. Everybody's trying to trade what they can to Milwaukee because they know Milwaukee's just interested in whoever to kind of salvage that relationship with Giannis. So I'm going to go with Zach LaVine, but it really is hard to judge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you guys summed it up nicely. I think Sabonis is the guy that I do think will get traded ultimately. he is a very flawed player, and that contract is truly awful. We talked about the Raptors for Ja, but I think it's going to be they either trade for Ja or they trade for Sabonis. I would assume not both. That would be super weird. But I do feel like they're going to trade for one or the other. And then, I mean, yeah, outside of the Raptors, I don't have like a top Sabonis team in mind. I've kind of pitched the Grizzlies before because I feel like him and JJJ would be super interesting. I don't know if that's totally there. Who knows? Maybe there's like a Ja Sabonis swap, something centered around that. I don't really know. But yeah, I feel like Sabonis, just based off his talent alone, I feel like teams might be willing to gamble on him. And I mean, another team I might look at is the Atlanta Hawks. I would try to keep that open cap space, the flexibility there. But I mean, if they're interested in Anthony Davis, why not be interested in Sabonis? I know they're a little bit different, but Sabonis is a more dependable player. The offensive skill set is totally there. So I do think he's a little underrated, but I totally get it with the contract, and his defense is just dog shit, quite frankly. So I get why you wouldn't necessarily want to build around him. But I do think there's going to be somewhat of a market. Toronto is still my number one team. And then, yeah, with the Levine and DeMar, I feel like one of them's going to get traded to Milwaukee and the other one's just kind of going to stay. Like you guys said, it's really hard to find suitors outside of Milwaukee, honestly. The Portland thing's kind of interesting because they're just known to like bank on talent a little bit. Maybe that's something there, especially if you can get him for cheap. Why not bolster the offense a little bit more, I guess? But at the end of the day, who knows? It's a really weird situation, but it does, by all signs, it does seem like they're ready to shake up this core, which makes a lot of sense because the construction of this roster never made sense. The lack of shooting, the lack of defense, the lack of really anything that you'd want from a modern basketball team always kind of baffled me. So I'm happy that they're ready to shake things up, whether that's committing to a full rebuild and tanking for this amazing draft class, which they probably should do, especially because they're already one of the worst teams in the West, or just kind of trying to retool a little bit. I think it's in their best interest to just shake things up.
I got some things to say about the Kings here. I got one trade that I thought of that I just forgot about, but I just remembered it right now that I came up with, and I think it kind of solves two things. Both parties would succeed. Get the Orlando Magic on the phone, Sacramento, and let's trade to Orlando some more shooting because clearly they still need that offense, right? And let's trade them one of your DNP players that just sits on the bench that you tried to trade for Jonathan Kuminga and Malik Monk over there. And let's give them Malik Monk. I think that the Kings, in return, could get Jet Howard and Jonathan Isaac for Malik Monk. I don't think that's too much of value for Malik Monk. It's a lottery pick in Jet Howard who hadn't panned out in Orlando that could still be a solid scorer for them, maybe replace some of that shooting from Malik Monk on a lesser value. And they get a defender in Jonathan Isaac. That's not a terrible contract, but someone that I think Orlando can kind of move off from because they already have an abundance of wings in their wing room with guys like Paolo and Franz, but even below that with like Tristan Da Silva and stuff like that. But also I think that he's just not really that valuable for their team as much anymore as he was in the past. I think that's something that can kind of work for both teams. And I also think that if they don't do a trade like that, that the Kings will end up with either RJ Barrett or Jonathan Kuminga by the end of this deadline. I think that's most likely going to happen. I think you mentioned Sabonis to the Raptors trade. I think that would be centered around a contract in RJ Barrett because I'm pretty sure Scott Perry drafted RJ Barrett for Toronto, so it would make some sense for those connections to get back together. But what do you think of that trade?
I'm rocking with it. Honestly, going into the season, I would have hoped that Malik Monk has more value, but like you said, he's been getting DMPs for whatever reason. Honestly, I think Doug Christie doesn't look like a real head coach. He looks pretty unserious to me. So maybe that's part of it. But yeah, I kind of like that idea. Just, taking a flyer on a guy like Jet Howard. Is Isaac's contract expiring by chance?
It is not, but I believe it is declining. I can check, though.
Got you. Because the one other thing I will say about Sacramento, especially with like the Sabonis rumors, the big thing that I believe Jake Fisher said that. Shout out to Jake Fisher. I believe what he said was they're not looking to take on any long-term money and they're trying to open up some cap flexibility. So I think that makes a lot of sense for them going forward. But yeah, no, I do like that idea, and I like Monk in Orlando a lot. And then just in general, I feel like we talk about these big three guys for Sacramento, but really any move should be on the table outside of trading like Maxime Reynaud or Nick Clifford, they're rookies. I mean, just none of these players should be untouchable. They just really need to shake things up. But yeah, what do you think about the deal, Elie?
I like it a lot too. I think Malik Monk in Orlando is very interesting. I think Orlando's kind of another team that just being in a wide open East is a team to keep an eye on. I mean, they've definitely been up and down all season, and I feel like we still don't really know who the real Orlando is. But a guy like Malik Monk would provide obviously a lot of scoring. I assume they would keep him off the bench, and I think he would really add another dimension to that team just because of his ability to score and shoot from three. I actually really like Jet Howard too, but obviously, I mean, you have to give up something to get something, and I obviously think they would much rather have Malik Monk at this stage. So I think this is a trade that could work out for both sides in theory. I mean, I think Jonathan Isaac's another guy that probably will just never become what people thought he would. So I think at this point, Orlando has to kind of do what they can, cut their losses, and just kind of, I guess, plan towards the future, because I do think they have a real chance to compete for a while in a wide open Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I definitely think the trade favors Orlando a little bit more, but I just remembered too, it will also free up some room for Noah Penda as well to get some more action into their front court room, which would definitely be nice for them as their second round pick that they took this year. So overall, I think that trade works good. Unfortunately, you did mention that they want to get expiring money. Isaac is not expiring. He's got 14 and a half for the next 2 years, and then 15 and 28, 29. So he'd be expiring in 29, 30 at 32 years old. But if I'm the Kings and I have an expiring contract in 2029, I feel like at that point, maybe that's what I'd want, because I feel like I'd be kind of, if I'm rebuilding now and I'm getting a pick this year, and I'm hopefully getting a top 3 pick this year, and hopefully can get at least a couple picks for the next 2 seasons at the bottom of the lottery, I would think by 2029, I'm at least one of those guys is kind of panned out. We're kind of crawling into that play-in spot. So maybe an expiring contract for them could be utilized to flip to get an additional asset maybe as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, the thing is, you got to pay someone. We always talk about you don't want to go over the cap, but there's also a floor. So you literally have to pay someone, especially if you're starting this youth movement. I don't think it's a bad idea to maybe take on some bad contracts, especially if you can get potentially some sort of draft capital or young talent in return. So that makes sense. But I mean, oof, Marone, when you read off that Jonathan Isaac contract, that surprised me. Gee, what a weird deal.
Yeah, it's kind of wild, especially for a player that, hasn't really, 4 years, $59 million for Jonathan Isaac here, kicking in this year starting. So a wild contract for him. Maybe there's some stipulations on it. I'll have to look at Spot Track, kind of figure that out. But yeah, a free agent in 2029 for him. A long-term deal, and I don't know. Maybe who knows too. The Kings are always interested in these wings. Maybe they go for Kyle Kuzma. We've always talked about him going to the Kings. Maybe this is finally Kuzma's time to go over there for Zach LaVine, and we get Kuzma and Ryan Rollins over in Sacramento. Man, if the Bucks traded Ryan Rollins for John Morant or Zach LaVine, it's gonna be a bad day. Because I saw the reports. It's not gonna be good.
That would be straight up malpractice with how good Ryan Rollins has been. Unless you guys have any closing thoughts on Sacramento, I do think that's a nice transition to Milwaukee, but any closing thoughts on this horrible organization?
No, I think I'm ready.
Yeah, so Milwaukee is in a really weird spot. I mean, obviously, sort of the elephant in the room is Giannis. Although he did say, I think it was earlier this week or maybe last week, that he's never going to request out. And honestly, I'm not expecting a trade at all with Giannis at this deadline. I just don't think it's in the cards. And based off all the reporting, the Bucks are buyers. They are interested in anyone and everyone. John Morant, sure. Zach LaVine, absolutely. Like you guys, we kind of talked about it earlier, but they are literally interested in everyone. So, I mean, do you guys see a player that's potentially available, might not be viewed as the most positive asset in the world, but would be a good fit on this Bucks team and could potentially give them a shot to rekindle this relationship with Giannis? Or do you think they're just sort of swinging for the fences for no real reason?
I think for a bad contract, they're probably just swinging at the fences for no reason. Like, maybe Zach LaVine would help them out offensively, would be really good. But John Morant just doesn't help them at all. I know Sam Quinn from the Third Apron podcast brought this up, but, like, I think the Bucks are second in effective field goal percentage, and they are really good from the mid-range, and they have really good scoring guards. So why are they going to add John Morant, who's shooting, once again, 20% from three-point range, to a guy in Giannis who needs three-point shooters on his team? It just doesn't really make any sense, especially when you're giving up your only wings on the roster in Kyle Kuzma and Bobby Portis to salary match because Amir Coffey's been getting DNP'd and Torian Prince has been hurt. So it doesn't really make any sense. The one player that I mentioned a couple weeks ago on the pod that we did with trades was Michael Porter Jr. I don't think that's a bad contract, but I think that kind of fills a need for them and still does. They were mentioned as like rumored to be interested in him in like one of the aggregated reports that I saw like towards the beginning of the Michael Porter Jr. thing, but I haven't really seen much from them since. Maybe they've gotten outpriced in that regard. Maybe they don't want to give up like their 2031 for that deal. But if you can get rid of Kyle Kuzma and Bobby Portis and bring in a Michael Porter Jr., I think that would really help out this team, especially with Ryan Rollins, Kevin Porter Jr., Giannis, and Miles Turner. That's a pretty solid team. And then on the buyout market, I think they could get some viable pieces as well.
Yeah, I was actually also going to mention Michael Porter Jr. because, of course, I was. But I actually do unironically like his fit next to Giannis. It's just the thing with Milwaukee is I feel like they have to, like, kind of like we were saying, they have to make a trade that obviously not only just benefits them, like, oh, this is a nice player that we can pair along with Giannis because they're both really good at whatever it might be, but it also has to actually make sense because Milwaukee has been very bad this season. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with Giannis being out for as long as he was. I just feel like Michael Porter Jr. makes sense because he provides a lot of that scoring, a lot of that shooting, and I think he makes sense in that area. I almost feel like in reality, they really just need a better center, which is kind of ironic considering that they just signed Miles Turner. But we're seeing that Miles Turner in Milwaukee, at least in my opinion, isn't necessarily working out. I actually did write about this at one point for 8 points 9 seconds about how Miles Turner has regressed over the last few years. I think we really saw it in the NBA Finals, and I think that's just continuing. Like, I think this is just the reality of Miles Turner at this point, and I feel like because of that, they need another center. But the center market is so just kind of strange right now because there are a ton of teams out there looking at centers, like Atlanta, Boston, Indiana, the teams I said earlier. And I don't know. I just don't really know exactly who would be a good fit for them. But one name that just kind of comes to mind, I just don't know if this is going to do it, is a guy like Nick Claxton. But again, I don't know if that trade is going to be much of a needle mover. Obviously, they still have Miles Turner, so they would probably have to include him in some type of deal. And I don't know. It's just Milwaukee's in such a weird spot right now because there's a balance of they have to appease Giannis, but they also have to make a trade that makes sense and actually improves the team. And I just don't really know how they do that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's a really tough situation. I mean, I love the idea of Michael Porter Jr. on this team, but ultimately it's going to have to be a third or fourth team getting involved to make it work because I feel like we talked about earlier with MPJ, the Nets are going to have to get some sort of draft capital just based on how good he's been. And yeah, I mean, I really do agree with that point, Elie, that Miles Turner just hasn't worked out with this team and he has probably declined, and playing next to Halliburton helped him a lot. But I mean, we even saw in the playoffs at times last year, like he wasn't closing games all the time. He does have certain deficiencies. I feel like people view him as a rim protector, but in reality, he hasn't really been that much of a rim protector over the past few seasons. The floor spacing is solid. That's definitely a weapon for them. But yeah, it definitely hasn't worked out. And it is tough to find like a clear center upgrade. Honestly, realistically speaking, I do think like Levine is a legitimate target for them. And I know his contract isn't great, but there's no denying the guy's talented. And if the value is low enough to where you can sort of flip him for some combination of Kuzma and Portis, or I don't know, maybe you even trade Turner in that deal, whatever the case may be, I think that's something that would make a lot of sense for the Bucks. And I mean, who knows? You're probably ultimately, I don't think you're going to get Giannis to stay. I feel like the end result is going to be him requesting a trade, which he said he's never going to do. I don't believe what he says, quite frankly. Or him, like, leaving in free agency at some point. But, like, it at least gives you a chance to be competitive for this year. And, I mean, right now they're not in the playoff picture, but the East is wide open. It's not that talented. And when you have Giannis, who's clearly still the best player in the conference, and then you add in a guy like Zach LaVine, who's still an all-star caliber player, nice fit with him floor spacing-wise, gives them some extra shot creation. I think that makes them good enough to at least get back into that playoff picture. And then from there, who knows, maybe they do win a first round playoff series, even though they haven't in the past few years. So I feel like LaVine would be the guy that I view as like realistic and a solid fit. Other than him, I don't really know. I don't hate DeRozan's fit. I mean, the 3-point shooting isn't there, but just for some extra shot creation, especially since they could get him for the low. I think that makes sense. I mean, those would be like the two. I don't want to just chalk it up to the two Sacramento guys, but I feel like that's really the two realistic candidates for them at this point. And yeah, I mean, it's a tough situation. I feel bad for the Bucks because you can't trade Giannis. I get it. But at the same time, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but Giannis has kind of been pissing me off. And I've lost a bit of respect for him this season because to me, it is very clear that he doesn't want to stay there long term. And he hasn't been accountable for that. I mean, Shams he doesn't make stuff up. He's not just going to say, hey, Giannis wanted to go to New York this summer if that's not true. And Giannis is saying, well, my representation was having conversations with the Bucks, but I wasn't. And then even watching him play throughout the season, I mean, recently they played the Timberwolves. His effort was awful. It was clear that he didn't want to be there. The crowd was booing the Bucks because they were down to the Timberwolves without and Rudy Gobert, and Giannis is booing them back. It's time, man. Nobody's going to hate you if you ask out. I feel like this is kind of the worst possible situation they could be in.
Yeah, I love that you brought up that point because I was just about to bring that up, the whole Giannis thing and not wanting to be accountable. That is the main sticking point. He does not want to be held accountable for breaking up this deal with the Bucks. He does not want to be viewed as a snake, similar to some other players where when leaving these franchises or losing that loyalty. And if you obviously saw the aggregation from Dunk Central regarding those comments, you saw obviously the Giannis stuff in the back and forth. But if you read the article, which I'm sure we all did, you actually can see that he's like, oh, I mean, maybe today I'm happy, but tomorrow I'm not, and yada, yada, yada. My wife could be very happy, but maybe my wife's the one that wants to break up with me. Like, clearly trying to avoid the situation in all entirety of saying, like, yeah, I do not want to be here. I want to be gone. It's not going to happen this season. Like you said, Eamon, I do think he will remain with the Bucks this year. This will be the last ditch effort, regardless if it's trading for Zach LaVine, John Morant, whoever it is to save, because then I think moving Giannis to the center and maybe using Miles Turner as like a tradable contract could be something for them. I know Elie obviously covered Miles Turner with the Pacers last year. A team that I think could be interested in for Miles Turner is a team we've kind of mentioned before with other superstars being interested, but I think the Raptors could be a team interested in Miles Turner as like a offensive hub shooting big. I know they kind of have that with my guy Sandro Mamukelashvili over there, but he's been playing really well for their team and maybe could get priced out for them, and maybe if they want to have some additional scoring and shooting in that front court, especially with how Scotty and Brandon Ingram and how their defense kind of plays with like their length and size, I think he could be like a little bit of a buy low fit maybe for an RJ Barrett. I don't think the Bucks would want RJ Barrett. I think it'd have to be like a third team or something like that, or maybe the Bucks are considering RJ Barrett as like another leap stone if Giannis leaves. But that's something that I also have been thinking about over the last couple of weeks, is like a Miles Turner to Toronto trade, something revolving around that too. Maybe if Giannis were unhappy, maybe this offseason or either this season.
I think that could work too. I definitely see Toronto as an interesting fit for Miles Turner, but I also just feel like Miles Turner he already was just like an okay center in his prime, and he's regressing. I just don't know how many teams are really going to be interested in Miles Turner at this stage, but I do think in theory Toronto really works. The one thing I keep going back to, and the one part that I feel like we won't ever really know the answer to, is what do the Bucks actually have to do to make Giannis happy? Like, is there anything in reality that they can do? Is the idea to trade for a guy like Zach LaVine or Michael Porter Jr.? Or is it just give him better support in the sense of role players? Not that he was just a role player, but like, things haven't really been the same since Chris Middleton has regressed and then ultimately went traded, or at least was super injured and then ultimately got traded. Things haven't really been the same since they traded Drew Holiday. Is the idea that, and obviously it didn't work out with Dame, so is the idea that instead of trading for one guy that could potentially take a lot of that pressure off of Giannis, is it just give him a more well-rounded team? Give him something along the lines of a Drew Holiday or a Chris Middleton, or maybe literally just bring them back. Literally trade for Drew Holiday again, trade for Chris Middleton again, which I don't think either would really make sense. But like, where do you guys think the Bucks should go, and which route do you think makes more sense? At least in terms of keeping Giannis happy and maybe elevating your team for the long run.
Yeah, so two things. First, the Miles Turner Toronto thing's cool, and I never thought about that. Second, that's a really tough question because I really know if there's an avenue where they can truly make him happy. I think what we know about Giannis, everything we know about the guy is this guy is ultra competitive and all he wants to do is win, which makes a lot of sense, and I totally understand that. Ultimately, I do think the Bucks have tried a lot of things, whether it's trading for Damian Lillard, whether it's bringing in Miles Turner and waving and stretching that Damian Lillard contract when he was injured and the fit didn't work. They have tried a lot of things, so maybe it would be trying to create a team of like really solid role players around him, but ultimately, even in a weaker Eastern Conference, I don't think that's enough to like truly compete. So I don't think it's enough. And then you look at some of the stars they could realistically trade for with their, lack of draft capital situation. I don't think that's enough either. So I kind of think they're unfortunately a bit screwed. I mean, all they want is like a chance to compete. I just currently positioned, I just don't know if there's like a way to get there. And I also will say just really quickly, I feel like Doc Rivers is not the right coach for this team, and I do think it was a mistake to hire him. I get why they fired Adrian Griffin, but I think that's another thing in terms of like developing young players and getting the most out of role players. I feel like that's an area that Doc really struggles in.
Yeah, I agree on that part, and their drafting hasn't been the greatest these last couple of years either, right? I believe this year they selected Boljub Marjanovic. I don't even know if I pronounced that right. I'm sorry, Finn, if you're listening, but with him, he was a Giannis pick, I guess. Like they were like, oh, Giannis wants him to pick this guy. They took AJ Johnson last year or whatever in the first round, and then they traded him with the Chris Middleton contract so that they could get Kyle Kuzma and we all know what Kyle Kuzma's been doing. Unfortunately, I just don't like Eamon said. I don't think they've tried so much and they've exhausted basically all their options. And unfortunately for the Bucks, going through these options, like going for the Dame trade and going for all these big moves, they just never panned out. Like if they could have gotten something that could have like gone their way, then I think they would have been in a little bit of a better situation. But it's just been very, very difficult that these players have either like gotten hurt or like a similar a situation with Miles Turner where he's just not playing to the value that he was playing in the NBA Finals last year and isn't looking in the great fit. They've had some like great hits towards the bottom. Like that, I think the perfect trade for them would have been the Trae Young trade if they could have gotten Trae Young. I don't know, like it's kind of a little bit of a weird fit with who you're trading, but I think they could have extended Trae Young and that would have kept Giannis happy, and that kind of like point guard lob threat duo maybe could have convinced Giannis like, all right, we at least got like a second in command here with me, like I can kind of take this control and feel a little bit confident to stay. But I do think with kind of the names like we mentioned, like a Zach LaVine or a John Morant or maybe even like a DeMar DeRozan, I feel like it's just kind of writing on the wall at this point for Giannis to kind of be knocking out the door.
Yeah, I think I agree with that too. Because, I mean, I'm saying this as an outsider talking about Milwaukee, but it at least does feel like they're trying. Like, it does feel like hey, we traded for Damian Lillard, and then we brought in Kyle Kuzma to take some of the pressure off of you. Not that those two guys really belong in the same category, but it's like, it does at least feel like they're trying. I just feel like at this point, it probably is best for them to go their separate ways. I did want to bring up one name, though. I don't know if this makes sense, okay? I think this is incredibly risky. Like, super risky. I don't even know if they can make a trade happen. What about Anthony Davis to Milwaukee? Like, do you think that could do it for Giannis? I mean, obviously, I don't know if that really makes sense. But in theory, I mean, hey, you send Miles Turner back to Dallas, which is, I mean, he's from Texas, at least. Anthony Davis and Giannis, I mean, yeah, it's not 2019 anymore, but that's still, in theory, a filthy duo. And he would definitely take a lot of that pressure off of Giannis. I don't know if they could ever make a trade work. I don't know if it would really make sense. Actually, they probably could make a trade work. And they do like Kuzma and Turner, and like they could probably figure something out. Super risky. Super risky. But do you think something like that would help and maybe salvage the relationship?
It's a good one. Honestly, I hadn't totally thought about it, even though I think the Bucks do have confirmed interest in Anthony Davis. So they kind of have confirmed interest in everyone at this point. And like on paper, I think it makes a lot of sense. Like that front court would kind of be insane, and the defense would be awesome. It just really sucks with Davis. Like he just hasn't proven that he can stay healthy. And I think like there's a 1% chance that he recovers from this injury and they go on some crazy playoff run, but there's like a 99% chance that just doesn't happen. And that's kind of how I view like every Davis trade. It's like the upside, it is there, and there is a chance where this works out. And he's a guy that can kind of fit on most teams, but the downside is just so significant, especially just with his injury history. I feel like it's too risky, but yeah, on paper, I feel like that would be a really intriguing fit.
Yeah, if the Bucks are not willing to give him an extension and just try to figure this out, because I know that's a whole thing with the Anthony Davis saga as well. If they're not willing to give him an extension, and like you guys said, right, like if they're going to trade for him now, he's going to be even lesser value than what they were initially gathering when they had those discussions with the Raptors and the Hawks a couple weeks ago. I think you could get it on a deal. Maybe I don't even think you might even have to include Miles Turner in a deal to get Anthony Davis. I think you could do it with just Kuzma and Bobby Portis, maybe some other smaller contracts, and then you could use that Miles Turner contract to go and get you even another addition to this team, go and get you either that kind of wing to replace them, like we were talking about earlier. Maybe that's the RJ Barrett, probably not, because then you have no shooting on that team, but like something like that to go and help out this roster to kind of bolster it. But I think the Bucks would be interested as long as he wasn't to take that extension, but also with his injury history and stuff like that, like Eamon said, I feel like it might be a little bit too big of a risk. But at this point, the Bucks are taking risks left and right. They waived Damian Lillard, they're signing Miles Turner, they're doing all this stuff, so it wouldn't put it past me for the Bucks if they were to do it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Any closing thoughts on the Bucks before we move ahead to our beloved Boston Celtics? All right, I think we can sort of close out this trade deadline segment with the Celtics. Obviously, it's all of our favorite teams. And I do think they're in one of the more interesting positions. I kind of expect them to make a trade, but yeah, what do you guys think? Do you think they're going to sort of look to be buyers or maybe shed a little bit more salary or kind of both?
I think they're going to kind of do a combination of both. I do think, and I know this has been, it sucks that this has to be the topic of basically the Boston Celtics because it's the only like tradable contract that they have, and we all know where this is going. It's Anthony Simons, right? It's the whole discussion that everyone's had since the beginning. It's unfair to Anthony Simons because before he was even brought into Boston, there were people putting him in trade packages and already discussing what the Celtics were going to use his contract to flip down the line, and that was before he was posted on the social media team and even in the front office. But he's been shaky this year, has gotten a lot better since the beginning of the year. Effectively defensively, he's had some opportunities where he's been a solid offensive creator for this team. But I do think it's to the point where if they aren't going to extend him, right, or find a comfortable extension, right, because I do think he won't get $25 million. I do think he'll get a little bit less. I think the Celtics should move off of him, especially because they do still need some of that big man help. I know Luka Garza has been really good over these last couple stretches. I know that Namish Keita has really risen to the ranks as a starting center. But I think there's no fault in calling up the Nets and doing the Terrence Mann and Daron Sharp for Anthony Simons trade. I think that just helps out the Celtics in many ways by getting them some insurance in the front court and move off Anthony Simons. They bring in Terrence Mann, a Massachusetts native, and someone that can kind of compete with Sam Hauser in that role because Sam Hauser hasn't been the greatest three-point scorer for this team, and with guys like Minot, who's been hurt, but Walsh and Brown and Tatum coming back, that wing room is going to get congested. So one of those guys I think could be on the out, and the Celtics could move off of Hauser and get some more additional capital off that as well to fill in that, other guard role. Maybe that's something they could do, or they could keep Hauser. I don't know, but I think that's something that the Celtics will consider, and I think Anthony Simons, if he's on the team at the deadline, won't be a bad thing, but I think the best thing that they can do is try to upgrade the center, and that's what they've been tied to over the last couple of weeks as well, with the Zubac, the Daniel Gafford, the Daron Sharp, the rumors flying through the weeks.
It really does feel like if Boston's going to make a trade, it has to include Anthony Simons, right? Like, in theory, it kind of has to, which is unfortunate because he's played really well. He's played pretty well all season, but especially in the last month or so, he's been incredible. And, I mean, the thing about Anthony Simons that's so kind of tough, and this is why there's still a lot of, or like the jury's still out on what they should do with him. Because if you don't trade him, he's going to be a free agent. Like, if you don't trade him and he walks in free agency, that's worst case scenario. And the safest thing to do is to trade him for a center. That's the safest thing they can do. And I do kind of have some concerns about what he's going to be able to provide once Jason Tatum comes back, whether it's this season or next season. Because ultimately, everybody is just going to go back to their role, at least in theory. I mean, like, Peyton Pritchard's probably just going to go back to being on the bench. Having Pritchard and Simons on the bench doesn't make a ton of sense. But I love Anthony Simons. Like, I wouldn't say I love him, but I really like him. I think he's been really good all season. If they're going to trade him, it's going to have to be for a center. I could see them doing that. Honestly, I'll predict it. I think they probably will trade him for a center. I don't know who, whether it's Daniel Gafford or whether they kind of do something a little bit strange and trade for Walker Kessler or somebody like that. I know he's injured and he's about to be a restricted free agent. I don't even know what a trade could look like. But that's something that I'm kind of just throwing out there. But I don't know. I do think they probably will trade Simons. Whether they should or not depends on, I guess, how you're looking at it. But I think ultimately they have to trade Simons. And then outside of him, I mean, who's the next realistic trade option? Like Chris Boucher? Chris Boucher, I forgot was even on the team. And I like Chris Boucher. If you guys remember, I was talking very highly about Chris Boucher when we got him. I like him. I still like him a lot, but he's probably gone. It's just, if the Celtics are serious about competing this year, which it seems like they are, they're probably going to have to trade Simons for a center. Who that center is, I don't know, but that's probably what it's going to have to be.
Or I think that makes a lot of sense. I like the idea of the Day'Ron Sharpe thing. I think that's realistic if they can't get a guy like Gafford. Gafford has been the guy I've been pushing for, even going back to like when Drew Holiday was available. I was like, they should try to look into that. I think that would make a lot of sense for the Mavericks, and especially with their lack of guard depth this season, I feel like it only increases the likelihood of a Gafford trade. So yeah, I think Gafford would be the guy I'd be really pushing for. But Day'Ron Sharpe, I feel like, is also a nice like fallback option and probably a little bit more realistic. Nick Claxton is another guy that's like kind of just like a dream candidate. I don't think they would do a trade for him. They'd probably have to part ways with some draft capital, which I'd be for. I'd look at Nick Claxton, but his contract's a little bit more expensive. Outside of that, yeah, I mean, I would say Hauser's a trade candidate for me, though, honestly. I would look to trade Hauser. Nothing against the guy. He was awesome. He was a big part of that championship team. But when you look at just how loaded this win room is and that Hauser's kind of underperformed and that you're going to be integrating JT back soon, I would just kind of look to part ways with him. And he does have one of those more tradable contracts. You obviously don't want to give up on one of the young guys. So I feel like, honestly, if I had to list like a second trade candidate, it would be Hauser.
Yeah, he's gonna fall into that second trade candidacy for me too. I feel like, especially like you mentioned, the struggles and the fact that the wing room is gonna look kind of congested at some point. It's kind of needed. I also do think that we could talk about, like, I know Elie brought up Chris Boucher, but like Xavier Tillman, maybe they do use some of those. Like, I know 2 years ago they used those contracts to get second round picks. Like they traded Delano Banton, and then they traded. Oh, please tell me I'm
Lamar
not blinking.
Stevens.
Lamar
Yeah.
Stevens, thank you. I was a huge Lamar Stevens guy. He was competing with O'Shea Brissett for that final energy wing off the bench, but they both got traded for. I mean, Lamar got traded for Xavier Tillman, and then Delano Banton got traded for a second round pick, which then got traded for Jaden Springer. But like, we could see like those kind of moves on the edges too from this Celtics team, where they're just like flipping a veteran minimum for a second and then taking on another random veteran minimum just out there on the league. I know this isn't a veteran minimum, but someone that they've been linked to over the last couple of years has been John Conchar. He makes around like $8 million. He's on the Grizzlies. He could be someone that maybe they could go out and get, maybe involving themselves in a John Morant package and just taking on that salary and sending out like a smaller one, or doing something with the Grizzlies or another team to get that contract. I think that's something that they could do as well. I think the Celtics want to prioritize in freeing up this money for next offseason so that once Tatum is back, and they see this full roster ready to go, they can realize what additions they do need to make out on the edges to take them to the next level.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I feel like some Celtics fans have their sights set on some really big names, and I think it's hypothetically fun to think about trading for a guy like Avicii Zubac, but I don't think that's super realistic. But that would be like another like dream fit for me. Another guy I'll just throw out, and I think there's like a 0.1% chance this would happen, but I do think he's a sneaky trade candidate. Jared Allen, I think, would just be an awesome fit for the Celtics team. Again, there's like a 0.1% chance that this happens, but if I'm looking at like a high-end target, I would explore Jared Allen trade. And I mean, in general, I've talked about it probably the last few podcasts, but I do think the Cavs need to shake up this core. And with Jared Allen not closing games for them, I feel like he's kind of the odd man out, and I do think he'd have some really solid value on the open market.
I really love that addition. I know last week you talked about the Cavs a little bit and kind of their discombobulations. They lost to the Jazz this past week, so I do think it's time for them to actually shake things up. I know he was a big Michael Porter Jr. guy. I've talked about them maybe going there for Darius Garland and some potential things, maybe I've thought of them maybe trading even DeAndre Hunter for Hachimura to get some flexibility as well. They're an interesting team, but Jared Allen on the Celtics would be cool, especially if Celtics could do a 3 or 4 team deal involving a player and Anthony Simons to take back that Jared Allen contract, which would be a cheaper contract this season as well. Even if it's more long term, I think that would be a perfect center for them.
I could see it happening. I know Eamon and I were kind of talking about a few days ago about how we feel like the Pacers would be a really good fit for Jared Allen. I do think Cleveland has to make a move. Is Jared Allen the guy to trade? Maybe. But I think it's pretty clear that they probably need to make a move. It doesn't have to be this season, but just at some point soon, they're going to have to make a trade. I do think Jared Allen should net them some really good assets in return. I could definitely see Boston not taking a chance, but just trading for a guy like Jared Allen. I think he'd be a really good fit for the team, and I could see it happening for sure.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna bring up this idea that Jared Allen needs to be traded for the next couple weeks. I don't know why I'm really passionate about this one. I kind of hate the season that the Cavs are having, and I know like injuries have been a factor, but it's like pretty clear to me this core four is just not working out. And when you have one of your quote unquote core four not closing any games, it's time to go, buddy, with all due respect. And we would love you in Boston, Jared Allen. I just want to make that clear. Maybe that's why I want to keep pushing this trade idea. But there's a lot of teams around the league who could use him. Like we talked about the Warriors needing a center. Maybe that's another option for them. But yeah, I mean, overall, any other thoughts about the Celtics, whether it's like trade deadline related or just like a general check-in?
I'm just going to say this because I know we're all Jaylen Brown stans on here, and Eamon's got the jersey hanging up in the background. I am just so happy to see that he is doing this right now for the Celtics, having this great year, and the trolls have finally been quiet. I was looking through my old tweets. I was going back. There's some funny things that people were saying before the season about Jaylen Brown, and they haven't said a word since. So it's been very, very great to watch.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I knew Jaylen Brown would take a step up. I didn't even think it would be like this. He's a legit MVP candidate, which I'm so happy to see. I really am.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I second all of that. He's been absolutely incredible, and it's been amazing to watch. And yeah, like you guys said, he's just silenced all the doubters, and it's awesome. I mean, this isn't a slight against Tatum, but it is kind of crazy that like JB probably has a better MVP case than Tatum has ever had, just based on. I mean, a part of it is how wide open the race is now without Jokic. And the other factor would just be like, he's just so important to this team and they've exceeded any and all expectations. I think Shea's probably going to win it, but it would be really cool just to even see JB finish like top 3 in MVP voting.
But I think he'll get into the potential of top 3 MVP voting this year. He's playing very, very well, and depending on, I know Jokic is supposed to come back, but we don't know if he's going to miss any more games after that. That could put him into that race, I think, with Luka and Shea to be in the top 3, I think, by the end of the season.
I agree with that 100%. I feel like there has been some like legitimate buzz. It's deservingly so. All right. Unless we have any closing thoughts on the Celtics, I think we can move ahead to some questions from the audience here.
Works for me.
All right, first starting off, this is a Celtics-related question. Kind of a simple one, but I love it from our guy. Charlie, he wants to know, is Luka Garza real?
I've never met him, so I guess I don't know.
I mean, I've seen him play in real life for the Timberwolves before. Once back in the day, I think it was like 2021 or 2022, I went to the game, and he played like 3 minutes, and he didn't really play that well. So I was like, oh, Luka Garza. But I I won't say. I'll say he's real. I'll give him the credit. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Caitlin Clark was saying that he's the real deal. So if she's saying he's the real deal, you have to believe in Luka Garza being the real deal. I believe shooting like 50% from 3-pointers this year for the Celtics team, and pretty solid offensive piece for them in the front court. I really like him.
No, absolutely.
I'll lean towards yes. He's real. But ask me tomorrow, my answer might change.
No, for sure. I don't think I've ever told this story on the podcast, but I was at the summer league and I was walking out of, I think it was like Celtics Knicks or whatever, and I was probably like within like 5-10 feet of Luka Garza, so I can confirm that he is a real person. However, I very much understand the question. Based off the amount of energy that Luka Garza plays with, it doesn't seem like he's a real human at sometimes. His energy is just truly unmatched, and it's been a lot of fun to watch. I mean, he's a guy that's really surprised me a lot this season. And I mean, another thing that I love about him is it's kind of like a unique thing. Just the way he runs is hilarious.
Yeah, he's at the full, right? Yeah, it's so funny.
So I could definitely see why you might think he's not real, but I do think he's a very real person. And his contributions to this team have been really awesome this season, and he's playing a nice role. I mean, for all the talk about needing another center, he does look like he's a rotational level center, at least the ability to play some spot minutes. So he's been a lot of fun, and I feel like the Boston fan base has really fallen in love with him, which wasn't necessarily expected when they signed him in the offseason.
Oh,
I'm gonna change my mind. Actually, I'm gonna change my mind. I don't think he is real. Because have you heard him? Have you heard him speak? He shouldn't sound like that. Have you heard him speak? He sounds like Blake Griffin. He shouldn't sound like that. No. I'm going to say no, he's not real. I changed my mind.
I just think it's funny how everyone was just like, Josh Minot, Luka Garza, these guys are going to be awful before the start of the season. And then look how it's turned out. And then people were like, Chris Boucher. And look how that's turned out. So
hey, man.
Hey, man. Are you I was in the Chris Boucher hype as well, but I wasn't at the other.
Yeah, no, that is really funny. And I also think it goes to like show like maybe this was something we all kind of overlooked. Boucher was signed way later into the offseason than Garza was, and there's a reason for that. The Celtics were a fan of Garza for a while, and you can definitely see why. I mean, he definitely feels like a Joe Mazzulla guy, for sure.
I think the one point I really want to make clear, too, about Luka Garza is he's improved over the year, but he was out of the rotation at one point. And he still came back, and now he's better than he was before. Like, I do want to shout him out on that, because that actually is pretty crazy to think about.
That is, I mean, credit for him for always staying ready. I feel like that's a real skill in the NBA, and I mean, it's not easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely not, and that's why the Celtics embrace it.
Exactly. And that's also, like, not to glaze the Celtics and not to glaze Missoula too much, but, like, it's also why the Celtics are such a good organization, because they're always sort of willing to give these guys extra chances, and they always shake up the rotation, especially this year, which has been a lot of fun, and there's been so many guys that can contribute to this team. It's been awesome to watch.
I completely agree.
All right, we can move ahead to our next question from our guy Ryan Druin. He wants to know, what superstar do you think would be a better fit for the Yankees and the other way around?
All right. So, which one do you want me to start with first?
It's up to you.
Okay, so I'm going to go a little, not hometown pick because it's not a Celtic, but the person that I think in the Yankees that I think would be a lot better now, am I understanding this correctly?
Yeah.
Is Dan Marley. I don't know if you guys know him, Thunder Dan, but he played for the Suns for a couple years, and he was a very, very solid scorer. He played for the Heat as well, and the Cavs for one season, but when looking at his stats and just like the type of player he was as like a solid 3-point scorer and just like spacer, I think he would definitely be better in this version of the NBA where the 3-point shot and just shooting is more prevalent. Like looking back at his stats like that in his career, I believe he shot around 38% from 3-point range back in the 90s. So like that a little bit up. Probably a good 40% 3-point shooter probably in this day and age. I think he'd be pretty good. I think that would be. The Suns have someone like that. I agree that he would on the team that can shoot. I would very, very like to see that in the NBA and something like that. And then someone that I think from this kind of better, someone we earlier, I think John Morant would be very, very solid in the 90s as an active rim aggressor, especially in the earlier part of his career, like his first couple of seasons. I think his downhill aggressiveness and threat would just be so crazy in the 90s that people would be like fearing him like they feared Shaq attacking the rim down in the paint when he was just getting attacking downhill because he's just such a fast player as well. So those are going to be my picks: John Morant and Dan Marley.
Yeah, those are definitely some good picks. Yeah, I can see the appeal of both. I think for me, if we're talking 90s star or superstar, or at least somebody from back then, I would give it to Hakeem Olajuwon. I feel like I know he's 90s. I think that counts. I think he peaked. I think he went into the 2000s too, briefly. But
Very
that's not.
briefly.
Yeah. But that's not important. Either way, I think Hakeem's the answer because obviously he was incredible back then. He's a Hall of Famer, one of the greatest centers to ever live. But he was such a monster in literally every aspect of the game. He was a tremendous defender, tremendous rebounder, tremendous post player, and I just feel like somebody who has that much two-way talent would thrive in the present day NBA. He doesn't have much of a jump shot, which is the only reason that I'm kind of skeptical to really go with him. But Hakeem Olajuwon with a legit three-point jump shot is, I mean, he already is, but he's one of the greatest players to ever play the game. So I'm gonna go with Hakeem just because I feel like that versatility would be huge in the league today. And then on the flip side, I mean, there are so many ways you could go with this. I'm just gonna keep it simple. Victor Wembanyama. He would be insane in the 90s and the 80s. Like, we're in 2026 and we're still, I think, just in awe of what he can do. In the 90s, they would have thought he was a witch. Like, they would have thought this was, is Luka Garza real? They would have been asking that about Victor Wembanyama in the 90s. So I'm going to go with him and just keep it simple.
Yeah, for sure. Those are some great picks. I feel like mine aren't like necessarily superstars. I feel like these are just like all-star players who could have been superstars in the opposite era. First, starting off, it's kind of similar to Bruce's pick. I got Chris Mullin. I think when you look at his size, his three-point shooting, feel for the game, all that, he would just thrive in the modern era. You look at his career, he shot like 2 threes a game, but by all accounts, he was one of the most prolific shooters in the history of the league, was on the dream team, all that. I think in the modern NBA, he would be like a legit like top 15, 20 level guy, maybe even top 10. I think he would just totally thrive and he would be a routine all NBA guy. So yeah, Chris Mullin is my pick from the 90s. The pick for modern day to the 90s is a little bit trickier for me. I don't know why, and I just can't quit this idea. I'm going to go with Julius Randle, and that's not to say he's like not good now, but damn, like his style would have been perfect in the 90s. I feel like he would just be sort of similar to what I was saying about Mullen. He would just be like a guy that's like a clear like top 10 guy in the 90s. He just has that bruising style and that physicality I think would have done really well. And then also just, I mean, this definitely benefits him in the modern game a lot, but the way he can handle the ball at his position I feel like would have been like really unique in the 90s, and I feel like that could have potentially elevated him a little bit more. So yeah, I'll go with Randall. Shout out my guy Julius.
I like both of your guys' selections there. They were really cool. Especially, I like your Julius Randle pick because that's not something that I feel like a lot of people would kind of think of. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of outside the box. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like Julius Randle's had the perception in his career of being disrespected on every team he's basically played for. So I feel like, especially in the 90s with that style of play, if he was like favored to be one of those top tier guys, his story would be definitely a little bit different. And then to Ilya's point, I think Victor Wembanyama, they think he's an alien now. Imagine what they would think back in the 90s. They would think that he was somebody from Space Jam coming to life.
Most definitely. Yeah, shout out my guy Julius. I just one of the like you said, one of the most disrespected players for no reason. And I genuinely
Mm-hmm.
think when he played if he played in the 90s, we might be talking about Karl Malone and a much better person than Karl Malone. So let's go to our next question from Ryan. Another sort of all-time question. He wants to know which duo is collectively better all time, Steph and KD or Magic and Bird?
This one was a little bit hard. I would go Magic and Bird. I just think that they were both pinnacles of. I mean, not that KD and Curry weren't pinnacles of their dynasties or like eras as well, but like Magic and Bird were like the said like 1-2 matchup kind of for a majority of that time, similar to the Curry and LeBron situations from the middle 2010s. But obviously, it's a little bit different with Durant being in that conference. I think Durant would have been in those conversations if he was in the East. So you can kind of combat that. Obviously, very similar types of players, but we kind of talked about this before. But like, I would say that Curry's probably the best out of all of them, but Magic and Bird are collectively a little bit better than Durant. So I do think it just edges them out just a little bit, especially with their peaks being on different teams. I do think I would give the edge to them. And I mean, we could put it on the blacktop in 2K, but if we could get a time travel machine and see this in real life and put them in an arena, I would love to see that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that would definitely be a fun sight to see. I think I'm going to agree with Bruce. I think it's going to be Magic and Bird just because I do think Steph is most likely the best player of the four, but I just think Magic and Bird collectively are better. If we're talking peak versus peak, prime versus prime, and we're not really factoring in longevity, I think the peaks and primes of Magic and Bird are better than Steph and KD combined. So I'm going to go with Magic and Bird too.
Yeah, I mean, not to just be boring and agree with you guys, but I agree. I think you guys summed it up. Curry would probably be the player ranked the highest, but it would be barely over Magic and Bird, and I still don't even know if I would rank him above Magic and Bird, despite how much I love Curry. Like you guys said, I mean, those two just truly dominated that 80s era, and maybe it was a lesser era or whatever, but they were the two prominent players. Whereas KD and Steph, they were like just behind LeBron, which isn't a bad thing, and maybe that's not the best way to look at it. But yeah, collectively, I just think they're a little bit better. I mean, Bird won 3 straight MVPs. I feel like that doesn't get talked about enough. And Magic was really the orchestrator for one of the best teams of all time, which you could say the same thing about like Curry and KD for what it's worth. I do think that 2016-17 Warriors team's probably the best team of all time. But yeah, I mean, I agree with the way you guys viewed it. If you do want to go the longevity route, though, I do think that's valid. I was talking to Rye about this, and he was saying that he would favor Curry and KD because of longevity, and I think that's totally valid. I mean, you look at the fact that they've been really, really high quality players for damn near 20 years at this point is really impressive, and Magic and Bird just didn't play for as long, so I do think that's reasonable to view it that way, but I'm going to have to go with Magic and Bird on this one. All right, we got two football questions to wrap things up here. First one is from our guy Hayden. Hayden has a two-part question here. The first part, I'm going to leave up for your interpretation. He did this a few weeks ago. I'm still not answering it, Hayden, so I'll let you guys speculate what he may or may not have asked. I'll give you guys a clue. It's a three-word question there. And then his actual question, which I'm happy he submitted a real question this time, is who will win between the Pats and Texans this weekend?
Alrighty. So, the Pats are going to win this weekend. Now, am I confident that the Pats are going to win this weekend? No. I said this to my friend last week. As long as they made it into the playoffs, I was happy. They did that. Then they won their division. I was happy. As long as they beat the Chargers, that was the one win I think they needed to prove to show that the schedule, even though it was clamored at, yada, 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 the Bills played basically every single team besides 3 of them and only lost to 2 and had a worse record. I think that the Pats beating the Chargers kind of beat those allegations. They lose to the Texans, a strong defense, one that played really good pass rushing against Rodgers. I won't be shocked. I'll be disappointed, but I won't be crying and saying that, oh my God, the Pats are down, because we still have so many bright years of Drake May, so many bright years of this future going forward. But I do think that they will beat the Texans, but unfortunately I think that's where the parade stops for this Pats team.
So that's actually my exact prediction too. I was just saying before the podcast that I did the football, like the playoff bracket through the ESPN app, and I actually got every single wild card pick right. So as it stands right now, I'm 100%. I've gotten every single one right. I did predict that the Patriots would beat the Texans again. Like Bruce was saying, I don't feel super confident about that. Houston's defense is insane, and I think they're way better than their record shows. I think a lot of it is because of how slow of a start they had to the season. I'm still going to go with the Patriots just because I feel like as a team overall, the Patriots are better. I think their defense is also incredible. I don't think it's on the same level necessarily as Houston's, but they still have a really good defense. And I just trust their offense more. CJ Stroud, we still don't really know what he is. We still don't really know if he actually is a good quarterback. We don't know if his rookie year was just an anomaly or if that's how he is, and he just needs to get back to that. Especially if they're not going to be without Nico Collins, or if they are going to be without Nico Collins. I'm not as worried about their offense, so I'm going to go with the Patriots, but I also did predict that they would lose in the AFC Championship game, which I don't want to see. I also had them losing to Denver, which has happened a lot of times in my lifetime, going to Denver, losing in the AFC Championship game. I don't want to see that again, but that is what I predicted.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely valid. I think the Pats certainly have a shot here. I'm gonna go with the Texans though. This defense is insane. I also sort of did that playoff bracket, and I had the Texans beating the Pats, so I'm gonna stick with it. I think this defense is legit. The concerns about their offense are very valid, though, I will say. I mean, that game against the Steelers was just a brutal watch in so many ways. I mean, I was happy the Texans won as a Ravens fan. But yeah, the Texans offense is a little bit questionable, especially without Nico Collins. But I think my guy, Christian Kirk, one of my, not Charlie Kirk, Stephen A., but Christian Kirk, one of my favorite players in the league, I think he can step up in a big way for them. So yeah, I'm going to roll with the Texans just because of that defense. I mean, I believe the Chargers were the first top 10 defense the Pats played, and while they did win, let's be honest, their offense didn't really look that good, and I think they're just going to be in for a wake-up call against the Texans, but I'm not even just trying to be a Pats hater. I said it last week on the show. They have an extremely bright future, probably the brightest future in the league, so I just think they're, a year away from really realizing that potential. So I'm going to roll with the Texans. And our last football question is from our guy, Jacob Blocks. He wants to know, did we see Rodgers last game?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think a lot of people are going to say that it's going to be his last game. But if we know Aaron Rodgers, a guy with a big ego, he doesn't want to go out like that. He wants to go out on the right note. Do I think it's going to be with the Steelers? Probably not. But could it be with another team? What's that team? I don't know. But I do think there's a possibility he could be like, the Cardinals seem like fun. Let me go over there and enjoy the desert for a year or something like that. And just being like a filler quarterback. I think that's something that could happen.
I've actually gone back and forth on this a lot over the last few days because I think going into that playoff game, I said he's coming back. After they got eliminated, I was 50-50. After Mike Tomlin got fired or left or whatever, stepped down, whatever really happened, I will at least say he's not going back to Pittsburgh. There's one team I'm going to throw out there. They've been rumored or linked to him for a long time. If he comes back, I think the only team that might make some sense, maybe, is Minnesota. Minnesota is the only team that maybe could make sense. Have him or have JJ McCarthy learn under him for a season, even if Aaron Rodgers isn't the same Aaron Rodgers. He's still a Hall of Fame quarterback, still has a Hall of Fame football brain. I could maybe see that happening. Do I think he's played his final game? I'm going to say no. I don't know why. My gut says no. My gut says he will come back. My prediction will be Minnesota, but I don't think we've seen the last of him yet.
Yeah, damn. I really thought we would at least have one person say yes, but nah, I don't think so. I mean, honestly, I would be very open to it if he didn't throw a pick six on that last play. There's just no chance in my mind that he retires with his last throw being a pick six. Just knowing what we know about A-Rod, he's the ultimate competitor, and here's a guy that's not going to go out like that. So yeah, I don't know where it's gonna be, or even if it's gonna be next year. I wouldn't be surprised if he takes a year off, but I could maybe see almost a Phillip Rivers situation where a 43-year-old, 44-year-old Aaron Rodgers returns to the game. If he does play next year, I do like both those landing spots with Minnesota or Arizona, maybe even the Colts if they decide to move on from Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. He has that Achilles injury, so who knows if he'll play next year. Maybe he goes to a different spot. So I do think there's a few options, and there's just so many teams that need quarterbacks. I would bet on him coming back next year, although I wouldn't be shocked if he takes a year off or whatever. But yeah, ultimately, there's no way that he goes out throwing a pick six.
I feel at the very... Oh, my bad, Bruce. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I feel like I like the Colts idea, and then also to your point, Elie, he has to fulfill the Brett Favre legacy. That's what my friends have been saying to me, and as a Vikings fan, I'm just no, I do not want Aaron Rodgers on this team. He does not have to fulfill the Brett Favre legacy. But they're dude, it's only fair if he fulfills it. It's only fair. So for my luck, they got to get Luka Garza to the Celtics and got to troll me. Oh my God, Luka Garza's here, yada yada yada. They're gonna do the same thing with Aaron Rodgers. It's just destined to happen. He'll go to the Vikings. That's 100% what's
I
gonna
can
happen.
see it happening. I feel like no matter what Aaron Rodgers does, though, he's not going to officially retire. Maybe ever. Like, he might never officially retire. Like, I could totally see that being a thing where he kind of just steps away, doesn't sign with a team, and then it's like 5 years later or however long it is, he's eligible for the Hall of Fame, but he's still open to come back. But I don't know, man. I feel like he's probably going to come back.
No, 100%. No, I definitely agree with that he's never going to officially retire. I mean, he is an awesome football player, but he is just also just so insufferable sometimes, in my opinion. If you guys are A-Rod fans, my apologies, but like, I could totally just see him going on that Pat McAfee show every week or maybe even every day and just be like, I am contemplating retirement. There's a lot going on. I'm going to take a mushrooms retreat again for the 10th time. So yeah, I feel like he loves the spotlight. There's no way he's giving it up.
Especially for how he went out. He cannot give it up like that. He's got to go out and maybe, and I can see him like, I don't know if this is like a possibility, but like maybe the Niners, I know they have Brock Purdy, but if they don't want Mac Jones goes somewhere else. Maybe he could be like a backup for a team, and then like if they run into injuries or something like that, get that opportunity. But once again, with his competitiveness and his ego, I don't know if he's gonna be like, yeah, I'm a backup QB, because he's like, I just led the Steelers to the playoffs this year. I could be a playoff starting QB anywhere. So I do think that would maybe not work out unless the team's like, we'll give you 3 or 4 games guaranteed.
No, 100%. There's no way. I feel like A-Rod could never be a backup. That would crush his ego.
100%.
But yeah, unless we have any closing thoughts, we can wrap up the show here. All right, cool. Before we officially call it a show, though, I just want to give a chance for you guys to plug your work. Tell our listeners where they can find you at.
So you can find me over on Twitter with my name right here at Bruce Veliz. I write for Bright Side of the Sun, so if you want any Suns news, you can check out there. And then you can also check out the Suns Planet podcast, which goes live every Saturday on YouTube, where I discuss the Suns there as well. And then I do Switch City on YouTube as well, where I talk about just NBA in general. Talked about Trae Young a little bit, talked about Ja Morant with the trade deadline coming the next couple of weeks. There'll definitely be more content over there talking about trades and potential destinations. So if you want more information on that, you can just go and hear my discussions there if you enjoyed my talking today.
You can find me at seconds.com, fansided. You can follow me on all social media. My name should be around here somewhere, so if you ever want to hit the follow button, talk about some basketball, some football, some music, whatever, I'm game.
All right. Appreciate you guys hopping on the show, and to our listeners, make sure to go check out their work. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Peace out.
Peace out. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Sure. All right, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Cassels Cast. Once again, shout out to Elie and Bruce for hopping on the show. It was a ton of fun having them on as always. Catch you guys on the next episode. Peace out.